both surprised by the way we looked. The years had changed us too. We smiled and both embraced like old friends often do.
Hello again. Welcome to another episode of Gung Ho. This is the second part of Zeldin, the Zealot. It's October 30th, 2022, and Michael and my co-host, Jim Henry, investigative journalist. We go back a while. He's what you call a true believer in justice. So
Well, thank you, Joe. That's good.
talk about Zeldin again. It looks like the race is tight. I don't know why that should be that way, but I think Jim and I think that the Democrats have something to do with that, right?
Well, I think the Democrats have a lot to do with the fact that Zeldin is even able to run for governor today. But, that's a long story. I think the bottom line is we have a very important election, November 8th, a week away. The race is very tight, and Zeldin is indeed a zealot. He's running against the issue of crime and inflation. But if you look below the surface, his solutions to those problems don't really face up to the fact that, he's a huge advocate of guns. And in particular, the AR-15 is a weapon of choice in school shootings. No one has really put him on the spot about what he would do with the right to own AR-15s in the state of New York. I mean, that is an assault weapon. It's very hard for any kind of law enforcement to stop, let alone armed teachers, as Zeldin was proposing yesterday. And he's just unrealistic when it comes to this. But he's a captive of the National Rifle Association, like the Republican Party in general these days. The radical Republicans are just a captive of the gun lobby. And we've seen gun sales, absolutely soar in the last 3 years. Last year was a record for gun sales in the United States. Republicans don't want to face up to their responsibility for that. We've been unable to get gun safety laws through Congress. We've had the state of New York's gun safety laws under attack by the radical Republicans. And, this is just an issue of public safety. Many police that I talk to are very much opposed this open season on AR-15s and sort of concealed carry and the other things that he's in favor of. So, yeah, I think Zeldin is a menace that we need to unite around defeating here. Again, on the issue of inflation, the main factor behind inflation is we had a big COVID epidemic and everybody wanted to keep the economy growing. And so the Federal Reserve continued its low interest rate policy about a year or two long. So that's the Federal Reserve's decision that we're paying for now. It's also been aggravated by oil prices, and President Putin invading the Ukraine, clamping down on oil supplies. Also food shipments from the Ukraine, which is 40% of the world's grain comes from the Ukraine. That's driving up world food prices. All of these are global markets. It's not just the United States that is seeing rampant inflation. It's not like, Joe Biden created inflation. It's a problem that Europe, Africa, Asia, the whole world is suffering from right now. So Zeldin is just exploiting this because he wants to not talk about his crazy positions on issues like abortion and guns. On abortion, he really wants to deny women, the right to control their bodies. And I can tell you personally, as someone who was in a situation where, my wife was pregnant with a child that wasn't developing, and after 3 months we discovered that. If Zeldin had been in office, she would have had to carry this child to term, and it would never have survived. Can you imagine the hardship and pain that we would have gone through, having basically a dead child in your belly? But that's Zeldin's position. that there should be no exceptions to the rule of no abortions, even in the case of rape or incest, or in the case of, in my situation, it was a case of a child whose brain was just not developing. So that's, I would say, this is an extremist. This is in the Barry Goldwater into the Republican Party. This is the craziness that we see the Republicans come up with every so often, and now they've done it again.
Well, actually, he has no answers for any of the problems we have. It's, according to him, weapons in the street have such a bad effect on the crime rate. I mean, many of the serious weapons are committed with hand weapons. And where do they come from? A lot of them come from out of state, and he doesn't want to address that. We have to control these weapons. We have to get them off the street. I think there's 400 million weapons now out there.
Right.
And that's crazy. And the AR-15, the fact that it was ever sold is a crime. People that sold that. I know about, when we went to Nam, we started out with the AR-15, and then they gave us the M16. And people don't realize this. The AR-15 fires a round. It's a small round, but when it hits you, it tumbles, and it explodes inside of you. So if you get hit with a few rounds, like a small child, you could literally blow them apart. And this is what they're selling people over the counter. What the hell do they need these things for?
Exactly. I mean, I'm a hunter. I own shotguns for that. I don't think anyone is proposing to take all the firearms away. It's this extreme case of firearms. The AR-15 is the weapon of choice for the high school shooter. That was, Zeldin yesterday was saying that he would train teachers with firearms in the classroom to try to respond to people with AR-15s. I mean, it's just impractical and crazy. The way to, we just have a surplus of firearms on the street. And if you compare our gun fatality rate with every other country in the world, look at Europe, look at the UK. They have a fraction of the homicides and suicides that are gun-related, just because they prohibit firearms. The idea that you can't regulate firearms is crazy. But the fact is that behind the scenes, Zeldin and his zealots collect a lot of money from the NRA. They collect a lot of money from the gun lobby. And those are the people that have cleaned up on this. All of those stocks have soared in the last year. Zeldin is really just a shill for this industry.
What's the purpose of, in some places, some states have open carry. What's the purpose of walking down the street with an AR-15 strapped? I mean, what the hell is, that's crazy.
I think there's something, if you look at the people who are doing that, mostly are, frankly, white males of a certain generation who are feeling a little bit insecure about their masculinity. And, let them put their firearms aside. We'll see, what they're good for. But, there's an insistence on the Second Amendment. If you look at the Second Amendment, the language of it, it talks about militias. And you go back to the 1790s, when the United States was, when the Constitution was adopted originally. Militias were very important to the states. There was no U.S. Army to speak of. Most of the military in the country that was defending us against foreign enemies and against the Brits, for example, were members of militias that were organized. And so the language of the Second Amendment talks about well-regulated militias as being the standard, that they have the right to bear arms as the standard. There were no AR-15s at that point. What limits is there no limit in the Second Amendment on gun ownership? I mean, can we all own private tanks? I mean, bazookas? It's just ridiculous. I mean, the Republican standard and their interpretation of the Second Amendment would open the door to almost any level of private weaponry. and we'd end up with.
Well, it is that way in some places.
And it
not
is that
New
way.
York.
Yeah, I mean, of the 400 million guns in the United States you mentioned, about 300 million of them are owned by just 3% of the population, about 10 million people. And these are people who are basically gun nuts. They're fanatical. And I know a few of them. I mean, they're people who own 30, 40 weapons, and they really, idealize their weapons. I don't think they would mind restricting their rights to own high-powered AR-15s. That's not a huge portion of that collection.
I don't recall ever hearing or seeing a person hunting with an AR-15, hunting any kind of game. I don't see that happening.
Yeah, they're inaccurate. They, as you say, they destroy the target. If you happen to hit an animal with an AR-15, it creates a mess.
And the thing about abortion, he said when the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, he said it was a great victory. That's sick. I mean,
well, we've had Roe v. Wade on the books since 1973, and the only reason it's been changed is because this radical Supreme Court, appointed by Trump, I mean, Trump lucked out. He got 3 appointments to the Supreme Court, an unprecedented number of appointments, at least in recent memory. And he put people on the court who were already well known to be radical on this issue, and they were selected for that reason. No, Trump was an artful guy. I don't think Trump personally cares about gun rights or about abortion or about any of these issues. He's just putting together the red line issues that people like Zeldin can carry out to the voters.
Zeldin thinks Trump is a great person. He admires him.
Yeah, when we saw on January 6th, when the insurrection nearly, savaged the Capitol, and people like most of Congress were running for their lives, Zeldin was standing there on a cell phone, sort of basically not able to take a position. He never denounced the 2020 insurrectionists, the mythology that
he also
that
voted,
Trump was, he was basically didn't disown
he voted
the false
against certifying the election.
Yeah, he voted
How
against
could
certifying
that-
the election.
I mean, how could he be, he should not be in office. He voted against certifying the election. That's like a vote against our Constitution. That's a vote against our representative democracy, everything. This guy is, he's a zealot. He should
Well, there's
not
no. I mean, I think the word zealot is, is too
take an extreme
kind to
position.
him. He's, he's a fascist.
Oh my God.
And that's
I
the
like that.
phrase I would use. He's appealing to all those kind of negative instincts that fascism plays to.
Fear.
Fear,
Insecurity.
the rights of women. I mean, fascists are notoriously sexist. This idealization of violence and of guns. I think in his position in the Middle East on Israel can do no wrong in the Middle East. I mean, Israel it's a very contentious issue, and a lot of people feel strongly about it. I've been a supporter of Israel in the past. Most Democrats are. But when it comes to Zeldin, there can be no criticism of the state of Israel for anything that they do. They can murder a Palestinian-American journalist, as they did 2 months ago, and he doesn't say boo.
He's the most zealous supporter of Israel from our Congress.
I don't even think that's in Israel's interest, frankly. It's not in Israel's interest to have this kind of zealot in the U.S. Congress.
It's not in the interest of us to have that.
It's not in the interest of even of Israel to have people like Zeldin.
they-
It discredits their whole position because, if Israel would have a settlement with the Palestinians, and there would be a two-state solution. That's the solution that people have advocated. But for a long time, Zeldin is opposed to the two-state solution. He wants no states. He wants a one-state solution, with the Palestinians basically forced out. And that has been, I think, that's just another extremist position.
And he's also voted time and again against Obamacare or Medicare over and over again. You know, why can't people see that that's not good for them? You know, the working man, someone in office that, you know, wants to take your health care away, and he doesn't have no Republican has a plan for health care. What is
This
it?
is the classic fascist game plan, you know, fear, uncertainty, division. You target the, you know, the other. You target the immigrant, the people who are going to, quote, take your jobs. You target people who are different. You worry about crime and violence, and you know, you talk about all the negative factors in society. There's no vision of a positive community that comes together. So,
Well,
you know,
his
this is the
attitude,
playbook,
yeah.
and they've used it again and again, and they're using it again here. They tried it in Brazil just now, and we had a very, very important, people should pay attention to what's happened in Brazil, because they've just elected a new president, and Lula, a friend of mine, basically was able to unify many people in the center right, and the left to reject Bolsonaro, who really is a fascist. You know, he presided over this huge COVID epidemic. Brazil, number 2 in the world behind the United States in terms of COVID fatalities. Zeldin doesn't want to talk about the pandemic and Trump's total lack of activity when it comes to saving Americans. Trump sat there and told us to take bleach as a solution to the pandemic problem. And we wasted a year and a half trying to get our act together. And now the United States accounts for
How is a governor like
more than
him
1 million
gonna do
fatalities.
anything about the crime problem? What is he going to do? We need stricter gun regulation. We need some reforms, but what is he going to do? His idea is to fire the Manhattan district attorney. He can't do that. The guy's elected. He can't fire him.
Yeah, he doesn't have any really positive ideas.
Nothing. It's nothing.
His only idea is to deregulate guns, and you know that would be, and to arm school teachers. Do you really want your second grade teacher to be packing? I mean, come on.
And you want
That's
people
crazy.
walking around in the street with weapons.
Right. He also thinks that he's got the police on his side. I mean, the police I know and talk to, you know, are I mean, there are obviously, there's a fringe group of police who are engaged in all kinds of misbehavior, just like in you know, the society at large. But I don't think they really go along with this idea that everyone should be packing guns.
No, not at all. You know, think about it. A police officer usually carries a handgun, and I guess they have some backup weapons, but they respond to a scene with a handgun, and all of a sudden they're facing a guy with an AR-15. What the fuck?
Yeah, no, I mean, seriously, I mean, policing is a critical function in our society. You got to have good people want to be police. You know, they're not just a mercenary state. They're not just armed guards. And, you know, I think, frankly,
You know, as a result,
folks who have been supporting Zeldin, who are police, haven't really looked at what he stands for.
as a result of this flood of AR-15s into the market, our police have been like militarized in a lot of ways. They have heavy-duty vehicles, they have heavy-duty weapons, but that's a reaction to what the public has. The public has so many automatic weapons. Brings me to this, though. Zeldin is always bringing up the fact that he's a veteran. I don't know if he really is a veteran. When I think of a veteran, I think of someone that served overseas. And he brings up the fact that he was in the 82nd Airborne and he deployed with them. I don't think so. I've got his military records, and he never had a tour. He did 37 days in Iraq, in the rear. He was a captain at the
JAG.
time.
He was
Those
an
guys
attorney.
Those guys don't go out there.
Yeah.
But he wants us to believe that he's a veteran. He's still active reserves. He never did a tour overseas. Every photograph I see of him in Iraq, he's in the rear area. He's armored up.
But that you're missing the point. Zeldin started from day one running for office. He's been building his political resume since 2000, 2002 when he graduates from law school, Albany Law School. And the military thing was basically just consistent with this. Let's put that on the resume. Let's join up. We'll get a safe assignment, you know, in the office desk job. And for a few months, we'll say we were in Iraq. Okay. Now, roll forward, you know, 15 years later, he's a lieutenant colonel in the reserves. Okay. He can say he's a military guy. Well, I mean, if you scratch the surface, I don't think he knows anything about leading people into combat.
No, he's never.
And he never said a word against the Iraq War. You know, I mean, those of us who looked at that objectively from the military standpoint thought it was a crazy, you know, another radical Republican experiment. But yeah, and what does he want us to do now? Probably he wants a war with Iran. You know, like the United States to go into take on another Middle Eastern war with Iran.
All right, yeah, I know you don't like me to do this stuff, but he actually wrote this, and I have it here, with a woman that the United States should do this. I mean, this is crazy. Give Israel these bunker busters, 30,000-pound bombs, and the means to deliver them so they could take out the nuclear facilities in Iran. He actually advocated that. That is crazy. That is a zealot. I mean, I have...
Well, I mean, the fact is Israel would do that, and then...
No, I don't think Israel would do
I mean,
it.
if they did it, I don't think that Israel would be crazy enough to do that. But if Israel did do it, then we would be dragged into that war. It'd be unavoidable, because we're not going to let Israel...
What a stupid thing
go
to
down.
advocate.
Yeah, it's just a way of getting, you know, obviously that would, the military is opposed to that and would never be done, and it's a great example of,
thing.
it's a great example of his bad military judgment. The only person who used those bunker buster bombs, by the way, was Donald Trump. He used them in Afghanistan. You know, and they basically didn't, we see from what's happened in Afghanistan, they didn't win the war for us. So, we have a guy here who's way out of his league, and he wants to be governor of the state of New York. I mean, this is a very powerful position. The way New York institutions are set up is the governor has enormous authority over state regulations and policies of all kinds. He has enormous influence with respect to the legislature. You know, it's an extraordinarily centralized position. It will make a huge difference. He can appoint, for example, a health commissioner who would be opposed to women's rights. And that person could make it hell for doctors in the state for, say, treating out-of-state women who want to come to the state to have abortions. That could become very difficult. And, you know, that's the kind of health commissioner that he told the anti-abortion groups he would appoint if he was elected. So again, that's not an issue of women's rights. I want people to understand. This is an issue, as I described in my case, this is an issue of concern to anyone who has a daughter, anyone who has kids, anyone who has childbearing wife or is basically responsible for trying to make decisions about human life. So this is really of interest to all of us, regardless of our
Who would ever think that the federal government would be in the business, or whatever you call it, of regulating, you know, our health choices?
It's the most intimate relationship. It's the most difficult decision one can make as an individual. And the federal government has absolutely no business reaching down and trying to dictate to us with respect to, it's not just women's rights, it's people's rights. I would say as well that, you know, there's this huge contradiction in Zeldin's philosophy, because over here in this corner he wants to take away our power to decide for ourselves a very intimate private issue like abortion, and on the other hand he wants to you know mandate that everyone can decide to own weapons and firearms. It's just completely
Yeah, the conservative
inconsistent.
position is against big government, but yet it's okay if big government is regulating women's health choices. It's nuts.
Well, we keep using the term conservative to describe these people. I've described them more accurately. They are fascists. Their vision of the future is a very radical future. It's a radical it's a society in which we are at war with each other. There's a lot of division. There's divisions
about New
between
York State?
minorities.
Yeah. Isn't New York State sort of like a state on the hill, like a really good state, a progressive state, special place?
Well, the state, for one thing, it used to have liberal Republicans like John Lindsay. But historically, New York has been, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was the governor of the state of New York, and LaGuardia. They had a very progressive policies with respect to some of the best early legislation on education and health, on labor law was in the state of New York. There have been some errors like the Rockefeller laws against drugs. We've repealed those, but by and large, New York has set a kind of standard for the nation. And this would be a complete throwback to the 17 to the I guess the period would be the 1880s. Boss Tweed. We'd have the worst kind of government you can imagine. It's it's inconsistent with New York's liberal traditions. That's clear.
Well, we're coming to the end, but I wrote about this when Trump first ran, that both parties had abandoned their base, and that gave rise to a new base with a different attitude, and that gave rise to Trump. The Democrats did the same thing. Running Hillary, she was not connected to the base at all. It just angered a lot of people. So both parties lost control or connection to their base, and the Democrats suffered terribly because of that. And Trump has destroyed, I think, what really is the Republican Party. There is no Republican Party. It's some kind of personality cult now.
Well, I think,
We're done.
Can we say one more thing? It's just,
Yes,
it's good to be with you, Joe.
Vote!
Vote! This is a critical election.
Yes. All right.
Oh.